Good evening. Welcome to another edition of ILEETA Live. We are hopefully um, coming at you on this longest day of the year, June 21st, summer solstice. And we are 270 days out from the ILEETA conference, ILEETA 2024. Are you all ready for that? I know I am.
Yeah.
So before I introduce my guest, as always, myself, Joe Willis, Todd Fletcher, we're here, and we'll be asking our guest a series of questions. And you all in the audience, please participate. Ask questions, comments. We'll get you on with us. And I think we have a listener question that I'm going to ask here in just a little bit. So without further ado, our special guest tonight is Jeff Johnsgaard. Jeff, go ahead and tell us who you are for those that don't know who Jeff is.
Well, you just did. I'm Jeff Johnsgaard. So, Canadian police officer. I'm in my 20th year. I guess I'm pretty heavily into the reality-based training, and that would be with the Reality-Based Training Association, Ken Murray. Blessed to have been basically stalking him until he became my friend and working for him once I realized how much I didn't know about good training. Stole that line from him, as you all know, as well. Happily Force Science Advanced graduate, helping out with teaching of the Force Science Advanced class. Chris Butler, one of our mentors in ILEETA for sure, as well. He developed that methods of instruction class, and so it's a very, very good class. I guess I should say since I first took it, I was captivated by it and the wealth of information it had, and now I teach that for Chris and his company as well as for Force Science. So I do those things. Short version, I guess, right? But what do I do well? Well, that's up for you guys to judge.
Before we kick this off, I gotta ask this question: what kind of shoes do you wear to teach?
Well, depends on what we're talking about teaching, I guess.
Well, if you were to wear, do you just wear tennis shoes? Do you wear dress shoes? What kind of shoes do you wear?
Well, I mean, at the department, doing that sort of thing versus civilian versus something else. It has changed over the years. I wear whatever is best for my low back. I don't just have a shoulder injury and crack it to the side anymore, and now it's fixed. In my mid to later 40s, that the things just still ache, and so I go with whatever is best for my low back.
Well, the reason I asked, there's a question on Facebook from our buddy Graham, and he was wanting to know what everybody's favorite dress or semi-dressy shoe is to wear when they teach. So I thought I would throw that out to you and the panel here. Joe, do you wear any certain dress shoe?
Yeah, so if I am in a jacket or a collared shirt and maybe a tie or whatever, I've got this slip-on pair of Merrells that I love. They've got the right kind of cushioning in them. I don't have to worry about tying them or any of that kind of stuff, and they work out well for me. And then otherwise, though, I am a Vertex or Loa boot. And actually, Loa has been kind of my go-to for a while for rucking, for teaching. It doesn't matter if you're on the range or on a mountain. I like Loa boots.
Nice. Todd, any dress shoe? I don't see you wearing a suit and tie or anything like that.
Man, the last time I wore a suit and tie was the last time I was in court, and so I don't plan on going back there anymore. But the Florsheim's have always treated me well, and other than that, on the range, it's been Hakes boots, and recently these Bellevilles that were at the ILEETA conference and expo. I got a set of the AMRAP 3/4 top Bellevilles, and that's currently what I'm wearing on the range. So they treat me well.
All right. I wear a pair of black Asics. They're tennis shoes, but they can double as dress shoes as well. So I've heard Clark's are pretty good. Are we lagging here on? There's lag.
We are up in the corner. So, yeah. And actually, we got a hi from Ken Murray. We got something from Jason up here in the corner here as well. So, um, yeah, I'd say. Actually, is anybody south of Canada listening to us at this point, or non-Canadian anyway? Is this just uh, Joe and Todd and Brian talk to some Canadians? Is that what we got going on here?
Yeah, eh?
All four of them.
Well, it's a
So
boot
Jeff-
time to get some folks from down south here.
Good deal.
Jeff, I want to ask you to kind of get things started off. When it comes to the Reality Based Training Association and your involvement in there, how did you honestly? You said you stalked Ken, and that's probably the truth to that. But how did you get involved in RB? And what can you share with us about Reality Based Training that we don't know that we should know?
Well, what you guys don't know, I don't know. The average listener, I guess I could say that. Yeah. So back when I thought that scenario training was just another tool in the toolbox, I didn't realize that it was a very large part. In fact, I'll get to that in a moment, I suppose. But so then I read this book, Training at the Speed of Life, Volume 1. And then I, just did what I did. I called the guy and I said, hey, you know what? I've just read your book. Do you have any classes? I'm a police officer, that type of thing. Of course, I went to my department and tried to sell it and the rest of that, and that didn't go so far. But then the more I kind of read that book and talked to some other people in the industry, I had the fortune to be at a Colonel Grossman seminar and try to make friends with him as well. And luckily, we just happened to have dinner and he mentioned Ken as well. And so it was pushing it towards that it would be an investment well worth your time. Okay. So then I ended up going to Texas, actually. It was the first time I met Ken for a course. Was Texas DPS was hosting, and I came down, paid my own way to take it as a candidate, of course, and that I could talk about that for a while. A lot of things came out of that. I'd like to think back then I was still, had a very low ego and the rest of it, but I did think I was doing that sort of thing already and just hoping to learn other stuff, like hoping to add to it, hoping to put jets on it, that's that sort of thing. But I felt like I was gut punched, in all honesty, that week, not on purpose, but Ken laid out for me a whole bunch of things I didn't know. Meaning I had no idea how these training scars, right? These things, these unintentional consequences that I was perpetuating, I was doing, and they were on purpose, as in like I thought I was doing the right thing, but there was some negative consequences. And not only did I just not understand that, but there was a whole genre, a whole realm of things happening there that I just unconscious incompetence. I just completely didn't know that I didn't know. And so, as I said, the gut punch was that, I'd been training, obviously myself, my coworkers, deep passion for doing so, my mission, cause, and calling. And I had then been faced 0 degrees of separation, point blank in the nose with, I was not doing it right. And to the point, it wasn't neutral either. It was negative. I was doing negative things along with what I was getting positive results or thinking I was going in the right direction and not understanding that at all. And so I distinctly remember walking up to Ken on Friday, the last day of the class, and I said, there's just so much. Like, how do I go back to an agency now and explain this experience to them, which is, of course, what has been years and years now of working with Ken, that course, that 1 week course where we joke that you basically have to go to it to learn to speak Ken, because it's different. It's just a different thing. And we kind of laugh when we say, but it's true. It's absolutely true. And so there's a different vernacular. There's a different lexicon entirely. In fact, just today, he was finishing a 61-page glossary. That's a book in and of itself, where he took methods of instruction and the RBTA and put those two glossaries together finally. And it's just going to go out to everybody because that's the kind of guy he is. What I'm hitting at is saying that to him. How am I going to go back to my agency? There's really only, I mean, any agency I've been to, even like high-end organizations, military, etc. I mean, 5%, 10% at the most different would be the way that the Reality-Based Training Association has come through experience to see this is the most optimal way of doing it. Like a 10% max difference, but it makes all the difference in the world. And it's not just an emotional feeling like I believe it. I I will bet my pension on it, retention and transfer. You will get these results from people after time passes, retention in a novel and stimulus environment, transfer, which is what we're all after. And so Ken looked at me and he said, well, I mean, best time to plant a tree 25 years ago, right? Second best time right now. What are you going to do with this information now? And I'll tell you, back then, it was a tough one for me because I knew I was going to go back and it wasn't going to be these changes. It wasn't going to be the things that I could implement because people, number one, didn't believe in it. Number two, who was I anyway? I was a junior instructor and I already had that name, like doing other things. Who pays to go somewhere else and now bring back this information, right? That kind of idea. Those stories are all, we've shared all of those, right? Each and every one of us has one basically. And then, so then I started with a project. As staff sergeants and sergeants changed and moved, things got a little easier, things got a little harder, but time is the great equalizer, and nothing I've ever gotten from the love of my life, the best relationship I have with my wife, my health, my fitness, my anything like that. None of that stuff came easy to me. Everything from me was just drips of consistency, and of course, on top of that was seeking out information, wise people having conversations about wise things, and then just taking that information and trying to apply it so that I'm not doing, we can, as we said, we could talk about fitness, for example, right? I certainly don't do, I do a third of the working out that I used to, a third of it, but I have 300 times my recovery, my thinking, my sleep, my nutrition, those types of ideas. And then through the methods of instruction class with Chris Butler, here's 150 peer-reviewed journal articles on why and how you structure the training you do. It's not an opinion. It's not because that gentleman was in, that great unit or whatever it was. Those are expert performers. But when we are teaching, the people we get in front of us, we have to be very careful the residue of those experiences and what they're taking back. So I guess as to follow Ken's last talk, hi, I'm Jeff Johnsgaard, and there's a brief intro into what, and how I met Ken and this reality-based training thing that it is to me. It's not the grandiose scenarios only. It's also the drills. It's also understanding the simple cue recognition as I do my elbow at a 90 degree, for example. It's understanding foveal vision and object identification. It's understanding how to teach those things on purpose. And that is what I see not happening in our community. We are spending a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of money doing training. And I can flat out tell you, we're not doing it wrong, right? But there are more optimal ways to sharpen that and teach it on purpose. Did the guys who got on the SWAT team through the selection, were they the best candidates, or did they survive the process? I can tell you in my old SWAT tryout, I would say that it was just the ones who survived the process. And so, the people who kept doing it and ended up in unit whatever, tier whatever, absolutely expert performers. And we can get into whether or not they're expert educators, because teaching is another discipline of its own, right? Of which I believe very strongly in, and once again didn't know how much I didn't know, right? Hence the idea. But what I'm saying is that those expert performers, I'm told Wayne Gretzky is an amazing hockey player. I've never played a game of hockey in my life, but then I'm told that he's not a great coach. He has a hard time articulating the meaning he's getting from certain things, where he's looking and attending to, what's going on for his SA, right? His situational awareness. What is that defined as anyway? And to pass on those eyes and that decision making and that filter with like purposefully. Once again, I don't believe that's happening to the best of our abilities, only because when were you ever, we were all given a brain at birth, but you weren't given a user's manual. And so then we became police officers and we just get the job done, and we absolutely do. And that's why I'm happy to be in ILEETA. It's full of passionate people who are extremely talented. That's why the conference is so great, just because you're actually physically there with them, and those, the in-between the sessions is really where the magic happens for me. But once again, you weren't given a user's manual for your brain. So then I became a soldier, then I became a police officer. And, no one ever taught me how to think. And they certainly didn't even tell me that how to think about how you think is another skill set to itself. And I don't mean to be talking wooey here. I'm telling you, that is where the money's at. Bill Lewinsky, one of the heads of Force Science, he and Patricia. Bill believes that attention is the new currency of our age, right? How often are we captivated by, attention is driving at us subconsciously. I mean, as a practicing hypnotist, got into it because Ken told me to. Didn't know what I didn't know about the unconscious and subconscious minds and calibrating people. Thought it was all BS stage show and all this other stuff. No, it's about language. It's about understanding how to communicate with people thoroughly, to understand where they're at and then speak to them or offer them words to expand their mental model and their decision making. That is a formal thing. But once again, I'm wrapping this up. Trust me, I'm going to stop talking. I'm wrapping this up by saying that's to do with language, for example. And other than cube development in pitching or Olympic lifting and these words that we bark at our clients, coaches will say, to cue them for their wrist break or whatever physical movement there was really there's no formalness to helping people think about that, develop their skill sets meaningfully. And then, once again, the recovery piece I just talked about. I work out far less, I train far less, but I 300% more recovery. Well, that's about, here's a group and here's a group, and there's that one over there. Zing on the target. What are we going to go home thinking about? Well, 150 side lemon sight, press trigger, whatever sight. And what does that have to do with gunfighting anyway? But you're going to go home punishing yourself over that one, aren't you? Of course we are, right? And of course they are. And so how do we get them to think better about how they think? How do we create feedback? Not just feedback on the range, where does the hole, but feedback for while the activity is taking place. Because I have used language to draw their attention to something like a trigger press in a rich, deep, meaningful manner. So I got an entire lesson plan around owning the trigger, an entire lesson plan around owning the grip, which builds out their mental model, their internal representation for a thing and its relationship to other things, done in practice so that it builds it out to a rich, deep, meaningful level. Then when they're actually doing something and performing, their attention is absolutely externally located. Night of first quadrants of attention, external, broad, and narrow, because that's where high performance lives. So just all that stuff. Over to you.
All that stuff. Jeff, that is so much all that stuff. Here's my challenge to everyone at the conference in 2024. Catch Jeff in the hallway and get one of those, because it is inevitable. You will have one of the best conversations ever, just in that brief moment. Jeff, there was so much packed into that, brother, that I think we need to do a little bit of just kind of taking a step back. There was a Jeff Johnsgaard one time, just refreshing the audience on something you said. Jeff Johnsgaard one time, who was sitting in a class, drinking from a fire hose, barely capturing as all this was passing at him, and just wishing he could be better, right? At that particular moment, like, how do I take this that Ken just gave me, that, all of this information, and now, this many years fast forward, you're able to package that into this incredibly eloquent, damn near lesson plan in that brief moment we had with you just now, what advice would you give those that are just now coming to the realization? Because last month with Ken, all three of us talked about it. You alluded to it just now, that we were doing those intentional, believe it or not, I'm willing to say it, intentional training scars because of unconscious incompetence. We just didn't know what we didn't know, and we were doing the best we could with what we had. And something tells me that there's an entire generation of folks out there coming to that realization through these conversations and others that they're having. Quick nugget that you could give all of us just right now, where do you start? And one of the things I took from you was I started a project and I used language. Those were two of the big takeaways that we got. There was a lot in there, but where do I start? I just had that aha moment. I'm going back to my agency and I need to take action right now to change the culture. What would Jeff Johnsgaard tell me?
Well, you just loaded it up. You just asked me how to change culture in one sentence. So I will say this: culture, in my opinion, culture is the residue of relationships. Culture is the gold dust left behind between relationships. And so, why did no one want into major crimes in my agency? Because of the relationships that were there, or the perceived relationships, whether they were true or not. Why, that type of idea. So what you just said, yeah, I started a project. So I would say to people, just be thirsty. And the main one where Jeff almost stopped and reflected time and time again and almost stopped was because I felt bad. I felt like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I felt bad for putting people who trusted me into, well, as I said, training, scarring them, or not giving them the most optimal. And so I'm sorry, I'm blanking on whose quote it is, but I know I read it in one of our great friends, Brian Willis's newsletter. That was, we do the best we can until we find out more, and then we do better, right? And then we do better. And so don't stop learning, don't stop going. A project and a program, two different things. A project, we say 5 years is zero time. We're doing reality-based training. I've heard you say you're doing reality-based training for 5 years. You now have started day one of a program. Because that's what we're trying to leave here. I want people to get better, faster, stronger than I did. And so hit me up about what books and what things and what courses. But, a project is the way in. Get the camel's nose under the tent and just start doing it. And then I asked the SWAT team, hey, would you like to do a little bit of shooting? And the next thing you know, they started getting results. And even though it wasn't where I wanted them to go, I was just making them shit hot and awesome at working the tools. But that still wasn't gunfighting yet, but it was getting them bought on board. And know that it's just an inch on the nose, which is that nautical term, right? An inch on the nose is a mile on the horizon. By changing your course just that much, just an inch, when you get and travel down to the horizon again, that's a mile difference. It's a mile difference.
Love it. Inch on the nose, mile difference down the road. And somebody threw it up there, and I think, Brian, you just shared it, that was Maya Angelou's quote. And absolutely, do the best you can until you know better, then do better. And, bro, yeah, absolutely. Nail on the head.
So we had a question from somebody on Facebook. How do you find the balance between the time you spend in the gym, the range, studying academics, teaching, all those things? And I'll even throw in their family time.
I guess I ran out of ways of doing it wrong. No, I'm married to someone who is also willing to keep trying and to keep putting in the work. And so the most work I've ever had has been on my marriage, and it's the best relationship I've ever had. But when it comes to skill sets, for example, I'm also trying to learn Espanol. So I'm on Duolingo, day whatever, right? That kind of thing. There's only so many plates you can keep spinning at any one time. And so the best thing I want to say it's Lawrence Gonzalez was talking about it in Deep Survival. It's a really good book. Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. And I believe it was in his book where there was a talk about a river guide. And so, I personally, if I'm going to go whitewater rafting, I want the river guide who's 20 years on the river, right? Something like that. Been doing it forever. But if I had two river guides who both had 20 years on the river, I want the one who says, "Hold on a second, I'm going to go down and check the river because I don't know the river today." And that is a huge thing. Remember, there's three types of people that get people killed, especially in scenario-based training: the unlucky, the untrained, and the highly trained and experienced. Right? And so I want the highly trained and experienced river guide who knows we're not using big boy rules, and so don't worry about headshots because we don't have the proper PPE or something. I want the river guide who knows to go down and check the river today. And so every day I check in with the river, myself, my mentality, my physiology, and then I use certain metrics for that. Heart rate variability is a very key indicator of, are you rest and digested, or fight or flight, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, for example. And I'd be happy to pontificate more about that. There's a hand grip thing, there's all sorts of stuff, but regulating the nervous system is absolutely key. So it does no good to do more pull-ups or certainly try to drive in more Duolingo information if my nervous system isn't ready to accept that. If I need to rest and digest more, if I need to focus on breathing more. And the old me was just doing another workout even though I was tired as hell on night shift. And the new me is absolutely not. Vitamin S, sleep, is priority one. And you can't learn, can't grow, can't do anything without it. And so how do I find balance? I label those metrics. There are three things that any person can work on: your body, your mind, and your craft. And I think all of us here, of course, are working on our craft. All of us here have been working on our body in some way, shape, or form. Who works on their mind, especially formally? And that was my biggest 10xing. Working on even understanding there were tools to work on the mind. And then when it comes to recovery, there are 4 pillars of recovery. You can sleep well, and what does that mean? What types of sleep are there? In the beginning of the night, there's usually this deep sleep, and that's good for the body fixes itself from deadlifts and from the tweak in the back, putting the plate in the dishwasher if you're my age, that kind of thing. And then, REM sleep, what is that for? Brainwashing, the glymphatic system, something doctors didn't even know existed. I think it was in the 1990s. We're still finding out about this stuff, rather than neuroplasticity, what alertness, focus, and rest, and what is necessary for positive brain change. So to understand the mechanisms that lie underneath those concepts has allowed me to pull those levers when I want to use them and become structuring myself to become more efficient. But I check in with the river each day. And even though tomorrow I'm supposed to write that paper, or lift that much weight, or do that thing, whatever it is, it's a new day every time, and readjusting to that. That was a big one for me. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Imagine you're in the stack, so to speak, at the door, and pulled myself out of that because I knew that I wasn't the guy that was going to be the one that I should be performing at. And that was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I thought it was weakness and all that kind of stuff. And now I look back on it, almost slap myself. But does that help? Oh, sorry. So the 4 pillars of recovery: sleep. Then there's nutrition. Then there's water, but that's also electrolytes. And I'm not talking about sugary Gatorade. And then there's thinking well. So every couple times a week, I try to run to the edge of physical instability and recover in a world-class way. But the game changer for me was every day, although I don't do it every day, but I try to every day run to the edge of emotional instability and recover in a world-class way. And that has made me a better on the door, working the tools, better in a relationship, a hell of a lot better interviewer, and all that stuff.
So you check the river at the beginning of the day. What do you do at the end of the day?
The end, it's funny because I prepare for a good night's sleep first thing in the morning. Meaning I go out and get photons, go get photon energy, not through a window, light energy. That sets a circadian rhythm, your suprachiasmatic nucleus, that master clock in your brain somewhere. And if you want to know more about it, Dr. Andrew Huberman, Stanford University professor, Huberman Lab podcast, exceptional stuff. And so at the end of the day, as well, something to make sure I'm honoring the most important things. If this isn't taken care of, me, myself, mentally, physically, spiritually isn't taken care of, then I can't be there for anyone I love or to do anything useful. And so it's not selfish, it's self-loving to make sure that this is dialed in. And then from that, I have relationships. Here, as you know, I'm over at a friend's house doing this with you now, growing. Hanging around wise people. But luckily, my wife's here as well. And so, end of the day, it's trying to reflect on that, and also knowing that if I just got to get up, I just got to go to sleep. And over the course of time, I will time maybe in the week or something. I'll try to rebalance those things.
Okay.
Go ahead, Todd.
No, I was going to kind of, one of the questions up here was on if you could suggest one book for leadership to read, what is why? And the reason that whoever asked that question and I are kind of on the same page is that you're very well read, and I'm going to guess that there's a whole host of material out there that you may be familiar with that I'm definitely not familiar with. What is a good leadership book that you would recommend, and why?
That's a good question. I haven't been at my library in a while. I guess it's hard to just throw out a general book, but if we could, Todd, so when we're talking about leadership, in what capacity are we talking about? I try to drive down a little bit on that. Are we talking about formal leadership? Are we talking about informal leadership? Because most of the people, I think, coming from Joe's kind of question that way, it's like we're talking about the junior ranks who are hopefully going to be the chiefs one day. And it's the informal leadership, and that any position has a leader in it. But, tell me more about what you're thinking with that.
So for me, I'm more interested in learning about those informal leadership positions up to instructional leadership. We are big in our classes on instructional leadership. We're big on those lateral leadership leading up the chain of command and down the chain of command. But it looks like the question was on formal leadership. So maybe you can address both of those.
Oh, well, I apologize. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on that one off the top. I know there's a couple of great books. I'm just trying to think of what the titles are. You can see my transdivisional search in my eye looking back at my Canadian, back in Canada, what my library would look like. I know that whenever we're addressing leadership, which is I think what we're really trying to drive at, there are skills for that, and some of the skills that are I guess they're so useful as tools would be, I would throw out the concept of Mr. CC. And so Mr. CC is just simply an acronym for the meta model, rapport, congruence, and calibration. It doesn't matter the order of the C's, it's just an acronym to remember it. And so I think that has been one of the best applications or set of tools to apply leadership, meaning the person has to understand, especially in formal leadership. I mean, if I'm going to be guiding someone formally, so then of course there's there's Chip's book. It was like Unleashing the Power of Unconditional Respect, I think, right? Another guy to grab in the hallway if you can stop him at the ILEETA conference. I just happened to bump into him, and he ended up giving me the gift of his time over tea, right? So that was wonderful. But conceptually speaking, then, yes, of course, you have to lay out expectations and all these things. I mean, we all get that stuff. But when you're speaking to someone, how are you actually even are you calibrating them? And then calibrating them, I sell to the juniors, right, or the young instructors, or the you know, as the combat hunter program, right, left of bang, right, and so now they're kind of interested in that. What does that mean? Well, you have to calibrate. You can calibrate a person, and what cues are you looking for? What things are you looking for? How do you know someone's in emotional distress or not? And then, of course, that's kind of what we're fighting against now, as in the recruits that we're now getting have less time physically with people. Heaven forbid they don't see them at all, you know, or something like that. And so they're not used to the cues. They're not used to these things, even though they probably can't articulate it, kind of like a Wayne Gretzky. They do understand that kind of idea. And so that alone is a formal thing that we need to practice, and that's a calibration. Then there's congruence with the message. You know, every cell, including the one in my tailbone, believes what I am telling you, not just, "Wow, it's a really great shirt, Joe," you know, or something, right? Like there's that congruence of message, and then so anyone who you're trying to build rapport with, especially if you're in a leadership position, has to at the very least respect the position, if not the person. And so, and that's, I guess, down the pathway that I would go with answering that question. M and the R, meta model, and R for rapport, congruence and calibration. And so that acronym, those four things, are formal training for every instructor, which is a leadership position, absolutely, you know, that I work with, around, and for.
And I didn't mean to kind of blindside you with that, but the work that you do with RBTA, with the 360 model, with what you do and what you were involved in at ILEETA this last year, it showed that you are a leader and that you are into the to what it takes to be a good leader and to help others in leadership positions. And so I appreciate that. You did a good job with that one.
Well, I appreciate you guys. I mean, I'm just there following in the footsteps of my peers, which is why I love this conversation.
Somebody said March can't come quickly enough, and I could not agree more. Like, I'm already, like you mentioned, having, you know, tea with Chip, right? Like I can't imagine, you know, I've had so many hallway conversations with him, and even a phone conversation one time, and I will tell you, like, those are like moments to remember, and they're so easy to come by in March. Like, literally, it doesn't matter who it is. You see anybody walking through the hallways or wherever, and you just, hey, listen, I read that paper you wrote. I heard you say this one time. And next thing you know, it becomes this, what are you doing? You want to go grab some coffee? You want to grab tea? You want to do whatever? Like, I think you hit the nail on the head. And whoever said that, Facebook user said, you know, I can't wait till March. I think we're all on the same page. Hey, so I'll be honest with you. I'm already, the gears are already turning. I'm going to do a LinkedIn post, obviously tagging you about the checking the river every day. Brother, I spend, like, it is part of my, if I do not get my morning stretch, a little bit of a workout in the morning, and very intentional time of mindfulness, I notice it by bedtime. And when Brian asked you how to get ready for the night, you said you start in the morning. 100%. I absolutely agree. And so I'm already thinking the LinkedIn post on that one. You also mentioned mind tools, like the things you do right now for your mind. And I think so many of us we spend that time where we've got to be physically fit and we've got to be tactically proficient, technically proficient. And we're so focused on those. But you mentioned something as you started to develop, really starting to work on some stuff up here. In addition to the checking the river each day, right, which is something I think we all definitely took from you, what is it that Jeff does to your Duolingo, sure, up here? What's your go-tos that are to stretch the mind? Give us some nuggets.
Yeah, okay. I guess, yeah, so checking the river, great. How do I do that? What are the checks? right? It's like taking the reality-based. There are two courses I believe every instructor should take, and that's not because I'm teaching them. It's only because I got into teaching them because they're so damn good. Why wouldn't you do that, right? And that's the methods of instruction class and Keith Murray's reality-based training class. I mean, those are the foundations of physical and understanding that funny talk, but it's formal, and then the rest. So what are the levers to pull? And so I've already said, like, so the heart rate variability is a thing. Whether you want to check it with a Whoop band or an Aura ring or all of these other devices, and there's some lower cost effective ways of doing that as well. But that is a real time metric of your nervous system, and that once again that sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, rest or digest, commonly understood as. So then I guess another one for me is knowing, and I mean knowing that breathing is a real-time link. If I change my physiology, I will change my psychology. That is a fact I completely own. I don't need someone else standing beside me with instructor on their shirt in order for me to believe it, like I do most of the time. Put your left hand here, your rounds are going left. We're negating the feedback loop in that person. So when I say that breathing is a real-time tool, something as easy in the methods of instruction class, we talk about the cyclic sigh or the physiological sigh. Once again, Andrew Huberman. Box breathing is kind of how we start to hear about it, combat breathing, but there's actually an innate. Just Google it, Andrew Huberman Lab, or on the trainer's bullpen, Chris Butler's free podcast, right? He's not, log into that one. I want to say it's number 8, but you'll find it right away, where it's completely talked about as to this cyclic sigh or physiological sigh. And the point is the power that tool came from. Like, what's at the center of resiliency? Well, knowing that I can do difficult things. Okay, great. Give me 3 times you did difficult things in an area like this. And if you can't say it, then you don't own that information. Then you don't have it. Even that cell in my tailbone somewhere is going to go, I had that happen to me. Never shot anybody with your left hand before. Gun in my left hand. Oh, and at that moment, I wasn't paying attention to what I needed to pay attention to, and I almost shot an unarmed man, right? And so knowing that if I change my physiology, I change my psychology, though changing my psychology to physiology much harder, that works a lot of times. I just grab people, I'm uncomfortable speaking in front of public or something. Okay, great. And then we can do that by moving them around the room. How does someone who is a great public speaker, orator, walk, stand, all the rest of it, and start to put them into that? And it's a neurolinguistic programming, little associate, dissociate, collapse. So you can Google that stuff. Very, very easy to understand. But that's a real-time tool. And understanding that helps me to drive my thinking. And so, and just knowing that when I'm not recovered, I am not the same person. I'm just not the same person. And I've gone days without eating, because I was a 6 meal a day guy. And then I met this Dominic D'Agostino who said, you can fast and not lose muscle mass. And anyway, we can talk about that story if it matters. But the point being, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so, what are the levers to pull, or what are the things to do to check in with that river? I would say that when I really started to get better, faster, stronger, when I was allowing myself in my brain a little bit of leeway as to how I was thinking about how I was doing, and I wasn't so damn judgmental, and I wasn't so damn critical, and I wasn't so damn right. And so I'm sure we can all relate to that, because I want to do things well, and I'm an A-type personality guy, and there's a problem and I'll solve it, and those kinds of things. But learning to think differently, I needed bicep curls in the brain on learning to think differently. And so I was the guy who was like, sit and breathe and single point meditation, for example, light or candle or whatever, right? All right, well, I tried zoning out, or I tried, how many seconds I could be doing that. Oh, it was 10 seconds. Okay, great. Well, next week it'll have to be 15 seconds. And then two weeks from now, it'll be more and more and more. Well, I wasn't that guy. And so I stopped doing that because I wasn't getting better. I wasn't progressing. And then so it hit me like a bolt of lightning where they're all sitting around talking about it. And they said, well, that's not the point. The point isn't that you get longer. The point is that you catch yourself wandering and you strengthen the pathway to come back. And as I said, it hit me like a bolt of lightning that it was catching yourself not on track and putting yourself back on track. We could go down the pathway of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's flow state and things like that.
Yeah.
But you got to have the skill set to be in flow. When your external attention and sorry, go ahead. Yeah, you want to?
No, I'm with you. You've got to have the skill set to be in flow, but it needs to meet challenge. And I think one of the things you hit the nail on the head, and I'm actually going to segue this into Jason's question. Sorry, gentlemen, for hijacking here for half a second, but he's got me nerding out over here. So you are everything. Csikszentmihalyi is like where skill meets challenge, and that flow happens. Sometimes we judge ourselves so hard for not having the skill to meet that challenge that was just a little bit too far, or for misunderstanding. And your example of mindfulness was spot on. That, and I remember being right where you said you were. That I suck at this. I'll never get any better. I can't do this thing. And now what I've found is, and you hit the nail on the head with the forgiving ourselves. The four of us can probably relate, and every single person out there listening, we are absolutely brutal on ourselves for that littlest mistake, that littlest thing, for not being able to do this. When we finally realize, as you highlighted with the mindfulness thing, let it go. Put a label on it and let it slide right by you. I know what that is, and it just passed by. The consistency thing that Jason asked about here. Jason Durst said, you talk about drips of consistency to create change. What nuggets would you give us to make use of those ideas? You gave us a few wrapped into that. I'd like you just to kind of tie a bow on it and send it out to
Absolutely.
Jason.
Absolutely. So hello, Jason. I know Jason, a great guy. Yeah, brother, I would do what we do in scenario training, what I'm talking about right now. What's your desired end state? Right? Get clear on a desired end state. Otherwise, what are you looking to do? And that doesn't mean you have to have it 100% nailed down, but what will it look like when I'm better at this technique? What will it look like when I have a handle on this thing, right? And so then seek out wise people and good information, and then ask them and formulate a plan that fits for you, knowing that no plan survives first contact, knowing that tomorrow I'll wake up, take a dipstick to the river, or whatever metaphor and analogy you want to put on that, and know that as long as I'm still trying to give myself the ability to do that, and when I say that, it means that I'm able to be consistent because I prioritize recovery. One of the main ways is that I go to bed early, a lot earlier than most people, because I need it. And I also have a marriage that supports that, because my wife understands that as well. And so Jason, I would say, and please just shoot me a text after this, brother. I'd love to talk to you about it. But what are you looking to achieve? And then if you can, like methods of instruction, conceptually understand how does the brain best learn motor skills or other information, how much time and effort can we put into something instead of that much more, and it won't be as beneficial. And so, just what we're talking about. So with meditation or shooting a pistol, start at a 10-foot target, 10, or at least an 18-inch target, 10 feet away, and start from a win, and work your way back from there. And so now the second part of that mindfulness thing, or that catching yourself and in that, whatever it would be, not optimal thought pattern, is the second part of that is now I absolutely love seeking out error, seeking out when I'm goofing things up, because it's in a non-judgmental way. It's with a non-consequential technology, right? I'm not doing it with a live gun and flipping it around or something like that, and I am seeking out where I feel like all thumbs, because I know that if it's hard for me and I'm not quite getting it, that's because it's new information. And no longer is that back in grade 6 told by Ms. Morton. To this day, I could shake my fist out. That I wasn't good at math and that languages were hard for me. So I always felt that this agitation when I was sitting down to concentrate at my desk was a bad thing. It's not. Now Huberman tells us, right? There's neurotransmitters and there's actually stimulatory response. And that, well, I was the guy writing the term paper on the last day because I thought I couldn't concentrate, and now I can't keep all the information in my head, without even referencing. So it's just amazing. So I'm seeking out error as well. Yeah.
Jason had a follow-up question, just so we're all clear on what is 10 feet in meters. Jeff.
Right.
Like
let me think about that.
Good deal. Hey, that was a tremendous. You packaged that really well, and I think honestly, brother, just based on previous conversations and where you're at right now, could totally do an entire episode on where you are in that skill meeting challenge, euphoria, sort of space that is flow, and how we get there. But I've asked the last several questions, but thank you very much for covering mine.
My pleasure, brother.
Hey, Jeff, we got about 5 minutes left, and I know Joe has to bug off for another meeting right at 7 o'clock. So what are you looking forward to in the 2024 ILEETA conference?
Just more of the same. Yeah. Honestly, my expectations are met every year because I go in just knowing that great stuff will happen, and it does. If there's anything, what I do love about the conference though is if there was someone that I did have a question with, a few times that's happened, do you mind if I hit you up at the conference? Do you mind? And then you get that time with them, which is just exponentially better than on the phone, although phone is absolutely great too, if you can, and that stuff. So honestly, like, I'm just talking to you guys more. I don't get to talk to you three enough. I mean, it's true, right? It's true. Like we see each other, but it could always end. However, that's going to end up working out. I think I'm not going to do 2 presentations this year though, or next year though, because that's just busy, and I just got into my personal time with everyone else.
Is there any particular thing you would like to see taught at the conference that isn't being offered, that you haven't saw at the conference?
Me? Well, you know what, Jeff? I actually want to ask you this question. You've been a regular contributor to the ILEETA Journal over the last couple of years. What do you have for us in store between now and the conference with the journal?
Oh boy. Thanks. Another article apparently. That's a good question. There's a few article titles that I've always had up. I was going down the route of gaze action coupling, the quiet eye technique and that. And although I did write those articles because I believe very, very strongly in the topics, I think they're unfortunately nebulous. You really got to grab guys and show them, but at least that information's there for them when they want it. I think I would like to do, the next one will be experimental training versus experiential training. And, when we started this off, it was about reality-based training. And so I'll end with that in mind. All too often, I travel around to very well-intentioned officers and departments and the rest. And what they actually have is experimental training. They are not well-defined end state. They are not well-defined role player actions. Who's the facilitator, right? Who's just a stimulus machine. And then the exercise controller, debriefer, certainly doesn't understand the language, which is not normal. Once again, we weren't given a brain, we were given a brain, but not a user's manual. We weren't given a user's manual as instructors for this. They were just, here's a gun that shoots paint. It looks like a gun. Take it, firearms instructor, and go with it. It's not a gun. It looks like a gun. It's a training simulator. It's hardware. And unfortunately, we started applying it in this world that is not linked contextually with representativeness to what's unfolding in a dynamic situation. Certainly not in the law enforcement threat environment, which is 0.25 of a second, ambiguous, high stakes, rapidly unfolding, uncertain, right? Where I have to get something and go to work without time to think. System 1 versus System 2 thinking, Daniel Kahneman stuff. And so there is a formal way of training that, and it's not even conceptualized. So if I had all afternoon at a conference to do a presentation, it would be on stuff like that. I can't wait to see what others are hopefully getting to that same point, but in a different direction, so I can learn from them. I mean, I think we're all going to the same point. It's just we're just in slightly different directions.
Well, right at the top of the hour.
I put you guys into a trance. I don't know what's going on.
No, not at all, man. Maybe a little bit. I'll be honest with you. Like, I think this is one of my favorite parts of all of these conversations is that if anybody knows me, they know that I can talk on a note, right? And like, hey, just go say something. And I mean, I've been in audiences where they'll hand me a microphone and say, "You're always good for a comment or a question," right? And just Joe, go, right? It's this right here that I love about this environment where I just shut the hell up and I can listen for hours with so many of our peers in this environment. And it is absolutely fascinating to me. So yes, maybe you did put me in a bit of a trance there, but it's only because I want to hear more. And I cannot wait until March to hear more. And I understand you've got some stuff coming up over this next year, and there's so much going on between now and the conference with you. Where can and actually, I think this is a Brian question. Brian, I'm sorry if I'm about to steal your question. Where can people learn more about the work you're doing, your website, that kind of stuff? Like, where do they learn more about it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first off, I'm 0 degrees of separation from anyone, especially ILEETA people. It's just jeff@naturaltactical.com is my email, jeff@naturaltactical.com. I work with and for Ken Murray, so that's the Reality-Based Training Association, with and for Chris Butler at Raptor Protection in Canada, well, actually the rest of the world where that Methods of Instruction class is, and then for Science in America. But yeah, get a hold of me anytime for anything. When it comes to I'll teach a bit of compressed shooting, or I'll teach how to work the tools, but build out, as I mentioned, these lesson plans to offer people, so that language now, I get a whole SWAT team, and they're looking at how they're driving the M4 in, for example, or mounting a carbine, and by the use of language, they come away after 30 minutes going, I just never thought about it like that before, and now I own that material so much more. That's the point. And so process versus the content, the technique itself, right? There's always going to be a new technique, a new whiz bang in law enforcement, which is great. A lot of them help us out. Well, we'll leave that at that. And but how we go about implementing them, thinking about them, and what is your strategy? What is your framework for considering these things, and how to train them, especially if it's a motor skill. Back to Jason's question, how do I add, consistency to it? Well, the framework for your evaluation for yourself, the stream in our metaphor, or, where you want to go with it. That's what matters to me the most. And so that circles back to how I think about how I think.
Awesome. Naturaltactical.com, right?
Yeah, Natural Tactical. That's exactly. That's the website. Just Google my name. You'll find me. LinkedIn, all that stuff. Instagram. I will be posting more.
Looking forward to it. I'm with Joe. I could sit here and listen and just shut up and listen to you and all our guests, because your valuable and meaningful information that you share is just great. So we appreciate all the nuggets of wisdom that you have shared with us. And I know Joe is a little bit late for his next meeting. So I just want to thank all of our listeners, watchers, people that are posting, asking questions. Thanks for taking out time of your busy schedule to watch and listen to us tonight. Joe and Todd, as always, thank you for helping us with the questions and keeping this going. And Jeff, especially to you, thank you for being our guest tonight. We learned a lot, and I know I'm going to be coming back and listening to this again and watching intently. One last thing before we go, I just want to remind everybody that the instructor proposals are now being accepted for ILEETA next year, 2024. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot of new instructors teaching at the conference. So if you're on the fence, don't know what to teach, and want some help, you can reach out to any of us. The four of us can help you. So just reach out, ask a question on Facebook, on LinkedIn. We're here to make sure that you are a success in your training endeavor. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. You all have a wonderful night.